Huh. Well, I can't say I didn't see this one coming. Hey guys, it's Riot Kitty. A while ago it was announced that Roosterteeth would be shutting its doors after 2 decades of existing. Like I implied in the intro, this does not surprise me in the slightest, nor do I feel all that bad for the company shuttering its doors. If there's anyone I do feel bad for, it's the employees who only found out a few hours before everyone else did. Or even worse, found out with everyone else. I know we're in the era of communication and all, but this is still not okay. You can't just blindside people like that. Honesty is the best policy in my book, and in my honest opinion, Roosterteeth did this to themselves. Like a 75% them, 25% Warner Brothers. Man, where do we even start with all the hooplas they've had? I mean, apparently they've operated at a loss for a decade now. Like, that's ever since RWBY Volume 2. You're telling me for most of the show's lifespan, they have operated at a loss. They haven't been able to at least make a profit with their 2 biggest IPs since 2014? That is insane to me. It sounds like it was a miracle they were even able to last till 2024. That's not even getting into all of the other hooplas that probably got them to where they are now. Biggest elephant in the room? The mismanagement of most, if not all, of their IPs, with Red vs. Blue probably making way too much of it at once, and switching out the entire cast to be cool and edgy, at least as far as I'm aware. With RWBY, where do I even start? Even when Monty the creator, was still alive, there was so much internal strife when it came to the production of RWBY. To throw an example out there, does anyone remember that Volume 2 post-credit scene with Yang and Raven that went nowhere? Well, that's because Monty wanted the scene in to set up Raven, but the other crew members didn't want this scene in. So Monty snuck it in. Since he tragically passed away afterwards, nobody bothered to follow up on it. Since then, the dubious things involved with RWBY's production have continued to rear multiple ugly heads up one by one, like a hydra, with Roosterteeth firing almost everyone who worked closely with Monty, including Shane and Monty's widow Sheena, seemingly throwing away most of his old work for future seasons, upgrading the engine to Maya, which actually makes the show more expensive to produce. Normally that wouldn't be so bad, but with the new context that Roosterteeth's been operating at a loss, this probably made their losses even bigger. Then there were the spin-offs. With the new corporatized Roosterteeth and the soft reboot of RWBY in the Maya engine, attempts were made to turn RWBY into a big multimedia franchise, with, shall we say, varying degrees of success, and just as erratic in quality control as post-Volume 4 RWBY. To be fair here, some of the RWBY spin-offs were actually pretty good and entertaining. There was RWBY Chibi, which was actually a pretty fun parody of the show and its characters. Then there was the crossover fighting game Blaze Blue Cross Tag Battle. I still find its existence a miracle to this day, all because the director really liked RWBY. There's also RWBY Ice Queendom, which I know there's been mixed reactions to, but I personally enjoyed it. The RWBY manga were short and sweet, although in the case of the Bunta and the Miwa mangas, a bit too short if you ask me. But in between these good supplemental materials are those that range from painfully mediocre to borderline shovelware. There was RWBY Fairy Tales, which I guess was okay, but really didn't have any stories anyone could get invested in, starring characters that nobody cared about, and having cursed renditions of characters people did actually care about, complete with mediocre storytelling and animation. RWBY video games followed a similar path of mediocrity. For instance, RWBY Amity Arena made the mistake of being one of those AFK gacha games, and only lasted 2 years before it was shut down. At least the art is cute, I'll give the game that. There was also RWBY Arrowfell, which seemingly was a platform for no reason due to its gameplay, with Roosterteeth clearly diverting talent from Volume 8 to have some animators work on the animated cutscenes for this game. But the worst of them all, in my opinion, was RWBY Grim Eclipse, which is just straight up shovelware. Roosterteeth certainly did not know how to make a video game. They abandoned it and ported it to the Switch with some costumes and called it a definitive edition. But by far the absolute worst in quality are the RWBY DC comic books, with some, shall we say, interesting storylines. The first set of comic books takes place during Volume 4, with some additional flashback scenes. I found some ironic enjoyment out of these. The Blake-centric issues are probably the best ones, which is normally something I wouldn't say when it comes to RWBY. but there's just some ironically hilarious and wild things happening that got a kick out of me with this comic series. Highlights including, in what is supposed to be a very serious scene, a very cursed rendition of Pure Nikos, making it unintentionally funny. There's RWBY getting high and talking to birds. Twice at odds with a drunkard party girl version of her mother, handling her inner golden compass and riding a polar bear off the floating city where she lives, all the way to what I can only describe as this comic's version of Noah's Ark. And my personal favorite highlight, Raven Bronwyn showing up out of nowhere in her bird form to bully a 6-year-old RWBY to tears and roasting her and her mother, acting out of character as a jealous, vindictive ex. I know it's not supposed to be funny, but that's the unintended effect when you've got a bird screeching this and not a person.
No, RWBY, you don't understand. I can turn into a bird!
Sadly, there is no ironic entertainment value to be found in the RWBY crossover comics with the Justice League. It's either boring or straight up bad. I guess with the first series, there's some mild interest there, of it being an Elseworlds tale and all, depicting Remnant's version of the Justice League, and Weiss name being shipped with Remnant's version of Batman, which is probably the only part of this comic I actually enjoyed. The same intrigue cannot be said of the second series, as it's Team RWBY getting transported to an actual DC universe to meet the actual Justice League. First mistake of this crossover was having it exist to begin with, because these characters are virtually incompatible to begin with, due to their vast differences in abilities and strength. And because of their incompatibility, the stronger of the two properties must be nerfed to prop up the other property. And that's exactly what happened here. In not just the comics, but also in the 2 movies Roosterteeth made. Oh yeah, there were 2 of those things. Now then, since I've listed off a bunch of RWBY spin-offs, I've officially set the stage for what, in my opinion, is a mixture of incompetence, ignorance, and desperation, along with a slight hint of pettiness, because while Roosterteeth was throwing spaghetti at the wall to try and make any RWBY spin-off work, the company seemingly didn't notice what did stick, what fans were asking for, or displayed jealousy towards spin-offs that they weren't so involved in. I know that sounds insane, but I honestly can't think of any other explanation. For instance, Blaze Blue Cross-Tag Battle barely received any promotion from the Roosterteeth accounts, not even having a single trailer on either the Roosterteeth or the Roosterteeth Animation YouTube channels. Suspiciously, I also noticed that official RWBY's promotion of Blaze Blue Cross-Tag Battle only started when Neo was announced to be coming to the game, which was a decision Roosterteeth personally made. RWBY Ice Queendom was kind of in a similar scenario. While the official RWBY account did seem to promote Ice Queendom a lot, this intense promotion of the show only really seemed to get started when Roosterteeth was making the English dub, i.e. when Roosterteeth had more influence, with making the dub script as well as casting VAs. I guess screw the sub version, am I right? Roosterteeth deserve to get mocked for the radio silence until the dub. Also for releasing the Japanese version on their website with no subtitles. Almost as if they only wanted people to watch the dubbed version, the version that they worked on. But the saddest promotion of all has to be the 3 RWBY manga. Between 3 books, there were no content, no trailers on either of the Roosterteeth channels, and on the Twitter X accounts, barely a dozen tweets mentioning any RWBY manga at all, with a decent chunk only being for merch drops of the Shiro Miwa manga, which again probably is what Roosterteeth was most involved in with these series. I'm not one to put a tinfoil hat on or anything, but it's just I keep noticing this pattern happening with everything that doesn't involve RWBY's writers or have Roosterteeth involved to a certain degree. It's either not caring or pettiness, maybe a little bit of both. All I know is the spin-offs made in-house or with more involvement from Roosterteeth get the priority, regardless of their quality. Of course, none of this might have not been so noticeable if the very skewed priorities of Roosterteeth and the incredibly infamous flaws of the centerpiece of the franchise, the main show, weren't so apparent. Goodness knows I've spoken enough about RWBY's problems already, but let's do one last summarized ramble for the road, shall we? I guess it all boils down to A, lack of planning, and B, forgetfulness. Nobody can convince me that either RWBY or Roosterteeth had a plan. After Volume 3, beyond these girls, these characters, go to the other 3 kingdoms. What do they do there? What foes do they face? What new lore will be dropped about this world? They'll figure it out when they get to that, which is probably why post-Volume 3, each season gives the vibe of being written in its own continuity, as the RWBY crew is not following up on what they wrote before. Rather, they're writing as they go, which, to be frank, is a mistake I made before. And the first story I ever wrote on my school computer back in high school. Not making the same mistake repeatedly on a professionally animated and produced show, because if you write as you go, especially on a long-running series, you will eventually forget some things. These 2 major issues affected every everything in RWBY, from character consistency to world building to plot to basic functions of how things work. Dishonorable mentions including Raven Bronwyn not being in Volume 3 at all, despite clearly being in Vale at the time of Volume 2. I could give a little slack for this one if not for the fact there was already a plan, as Raven Bronwyn was actually going to fight Team Juniper. Initially, I didn't see a reason for this fight existing at all. I just thought, hey, at least have her do something else. But with the RWBY writers writing as they go, they seemingly completely by accident created the perfect segue for this fight to happen, with the whole plot of the maidens and all, and Raven herself being revealed to be the Spring Maiden, killing the previous one per her request, so she says. So now I think Raven probably should have gone after Pyrrha to see if she had the Fall Maiden powers yet, and if she did, probably try to kidnap her to take her away from both Ozpin and Salem. Speculation aside, there is character consistency issues that are far more noticeable, such as Blake suddenly having parents. I like Yer and Callie, but with the context from Volume 1 to 3, the audience is made to assume that Blake is an orphan. When she talked about her past life, she only mentioned Adam Taurus, giving the vibe that he was probably the closest thing to a parental figure in her life, but giving her normal loving parents subsequently caused Blake to look like a terrible person who did not care about her family and abandoned them to go baby some guy she barely knows, which caused the RWBY writers needing to make Adam look worse so that she can look better, as if being the sociopathic leader of a terror cell wasn't enough. The show had Adam killing and ditching his subordinates, then he abandoned his cause to go and obsessively stalk Blake across kingdoms, being reduced to his stalker ex-boyfriend, who literally died for his ship, the most annoying one at that, as after Bumblebee became a thing in the show, other pre-existing character relationships didn't matter anymore. It became so obnoxiously obvious that other characters were pointing out or getting annoyed, or just straight up losing it, in an almost meta sense where the characters are aware of how bad the writing is for this ship, channeling the perspectives of the audience who disapproves one way or another. So the writers are most likely aware that they've almost completely reduced Blake and Yang to two dolls paraded around in a circus, but they do not care, or straight up can't take it that people don't like it. So some of them appear to use the characters to belittle the audience, especially with Mero talking to Blake and Yang. He's in the wrong for suggesting that they don't always need to be attached to the hip. Back to Volume 6, there's also Caroline Cordovan, who also got the same treatment as Adam, just at a much more rapid pace. Sure, Caroline was kind of a jerk and uppity from the get-go, however, that still doesn't justify Team RWBY and company stealing an airship from under her nose, especially since there was already an alternate option presented. Seriously, just to have Weiss go to Atlas by herself. RWBY crew, it is okay for your main characters to make decisions that would personally be inconvenient to them, especially this particular one, who can just call up her military sister and her boss, the latter of whom already directly stated that if she needed anything, she can call him, to get them a ride to Atlas, only needing to be stuck at home for a little while until Ironwood gave her a supplementary Untrust license to undermine her father's parental authority, like he would soon do in Volume 7. So yeah, I don't think there was any reason for Caroline to be made insane, summoning a mech, putting the entire city next to the military base in danger because of Team RWBY's poor decision making. But Caroline was only the precursor of what was to come, of what is one of the worst character bastardizations in this series. At least she's a minor character and Adam was already a villain, but General Ironwood was already a well-established good guy, even though he had disagreements about how to proceed with the immortal witch lady problem, which is, you know, normal to have disagreements and still not be enemies. Something so obvious was thrown out in favor of the worst decision-making Team RWBY and company has ever done, because after arguing with Ironwood about not being able to evacuate everyone, because Salem the immortal witch lady was coming to kill them all for what she wanted, our valiant heroes then had the brilliant idea of taking away the relics of creation and knowledge, the former which is of particular importance because it keeps a giant floating city in the sky, and without its fuel source, that big floating city will crash into the ground. With something that large, the resulting shockwaves from impact would kill everyone in Atlas, including them. Great job, guys, really great job. The solution then brought forth by the writers to make Team RWBY and company look better, as they've clearly just committed crime after crime and made an enemy out of their allies by putting their entire kingdom in danger and preventing their initial escape, was to make Ironwood out to be an insane murder hobo. After he shot Oscar in the Volume 7 finale, Ironwood really went all in on his trigger finger, shooting people at random ad nauseum, then deciding to drop a bomb on the kingdom he was so desperately trying to save last volume. Really now, the only thing that could have made this character assassination worse is if he had joined the main villains. So after all this thievery from the merry band of heroes, pulling blueprints for Stargate technology out of their buttholes so they don't cause the deaths of an entire kingdom's population, leaving Ironwood to die and Atlas to fall, after all this untold chaos and destruction, it's not really worth it in the end. Because the villains still won, they got the relics. 2 out of 4 pieces needed need to summon the gods and nuke the planet. This whole storyline happening is one of the reasons why I refuse to watch the Volume 9 epilogue, as it treats Team RWBY and company like they're valiant heroes who bravely sacrificed themselves, hoping to fill up the audience with bittersweet good feelings inside, forgetting what happened 1 season ago. But I didn't forget, all the while being very confused. The other reason why is because Volume 9 clearly wasn't Roosterteeth or the RWBY crew's priority. It was their stupid Hail Mary passes with the Justice League crossover. Yep, it wasn't Big Bad Warner Brothers Discovery making poor little Roosterteeth produce these movies. Nope, it was all them.
We already have these crossover comics, people seem to like those. We want to do more animation. Do you want to do something? And yeah, Warner Brothers was interested.
I suppose hindsight is 2020, as this decision very well might have caused the WBD executives to come to the conclusion that Roosterteeth just wasn't worth keeping around anymore, so cutting out so much from Volume 9 wasn't worth it in the end. Kinda like Genlock's entire existence, which is another IP of Roosterteeth's, one with so much bad mojo around it right from the get-go, to the point where I think if the show hadn't existed, Roosterteeth would still be alive. Granted, they still would have a bunch of money troubles, but at least they wouldn't be shutting off the lights. It begins with the creator, Grey Haddock, who allegedly embezzled money from Roosterteeth's other projects to fund Genlock, a most expensive endeavor, especially considering the show had some big names attached as VAs, including but not limited to Michael B. Jordan and David Tennant. That in turn caused the show to go over budget, hurting every single project that was in development at the time at Roosterteeth. The work culture surrounding the show wasn't much better, as apparently animators were forced to work 80 hours a week to meet Grey's demands, seemingly reflected in the show itself, especially in Season 2, which you can forget almost everything you saw in Season 1, including the main antagonists. Now the plot is skipped over, making everyone who's still watching the show very confused as to what exactly is happening. There's this new Ascension network cult who want people to give their lives over to nanomachines, sacrificing their physical bodies for a higher plane of existence, to be free of their pain. Nothing else that happens in Season 2 actually matters, because the villains win, and most of the main heroes off themselves for their plan. Yep, after spending a whole season trying to stop their plans, the main heroes are either murdered, or just give up and ascend with everyone else. There's not even any deeper meaning behind it. They're just like, yeah, okay, you're right, we'll die. End of story, roll credits. I literally only like 2 characters in this whole thing. One of them sadly dying like a moron, with the other one offering herself to ascend because she saw no point to her life anymore. Which, by the way, is treated as the correct course of action. Huh. If I had a nickel for every time a Roosterteeth main character offed herself and it was the correct thing to do, I would have 2 nickels. It isn't a lot, but it's strange it's happened twice. I have to wonder if Roosterteeth was subtly telegraphing that they weren't long for this world. Anyways, I did hear that Warner Brothers is trying to sell off Genlock along with RWBY and Red vs. Blue, but in my opinion, Genlock should never get bought. It should stay in a vault to rot. I mean, how could any company continue this thing after the Season 2 finale? Even rebooting it would be a struggle, due to the stigma the Genlock name carries. Also, there's not a lot to work with within the show itself. Its main draw has always been its star power, so any interesting concepts the show had can easily be applied to other properties, without working within the confines of Genlock. And that's honestly how I think it should be. Not every property deserves a new lease on life, Genlock included. The last 2 properties I am aware of from Roosterteeth are Camp Camp and Nomad of Nowhere. Camp Camp is just a generally funny M-rated show. As far as I'm aware, there's never been any serious production issues going on, or any juicy drama bits, which is honestly a rarity in a Roosterteeth show. It's just since it's a smaller property, Camp Camp suffered from a general lack of advertising after Roosterteeth decided to move from YouTube to their website, which is a decision I can't blame them for making. After all, YouTube has become increasingly frugal over the years. It's hard enough as it is to make a living on here as an individual, but for an entire company, infinitely harder. I just wish Roosterteeth made a better website, offered better benefits, stuff like that, to incentivize people to make the jump. So while I don't have a bone to pick with Roosterteeth over this, I certainly do over Nomad of Nowhere, since this show's production issues started before it was even made, and it all circles back to Grey Haddock and his questionable funding methods. He slashed Nomad's budget and absolutely refused to give the creator a director's seat, so said creator was stuck, slaving away at those 80-hour work weeks Grey seemed to like so much, having no power over where his creation was gonna go. It gets worse though, as it isn't just the content of their shows Roosterteeth is forgetful about, it's the fact that they made an entire show as well, as the last time anyone heard anything thing about Gnome Out of Nowhere was when Rooster Teeth hired a writer to pen a script for Season 2. Said writer was then moved to RWBY Volume 7. Afterwards, there's nothing but complete radio silence from Rooster Teeth. I've heard in the past Rooster Teeth doesn't cancel shows, they just stop making them. But at least in Gnome Out of Nowhere's case, I think they just forgot its existence. So I guess with how messy their shows are, I guess it should come as no surprise that Rooster Teeth's moral compass is just as skewed as RWBY's main heroes. For starters, there's all the telltale signs of a toxic work environment, with 50 to 80-hour work weeks, and crunch being commonplace, even when projects were pushed back. For example, apparently it was so bad working on Genlock that it gave one animator PTSD and caused her to change careers. It also threatened physical health as well, as one staffer suffered a severe back injury while doing motion capture, and was unable to get workers' compensation for it because she was working 12-hour days and missed a deadline. While working on Red vs. Blue, one of the founders of Rooster Teeth reported getting 4 hours sleep in 3 days, falling asleep in mid-conversation with someone. It wasn't really even worth it in the end because apparently Rooster Teeth is very frugal with their paychecks, if the employees received one at all. There's been numerous reports over the years about the company not paying people properly. If you wanted to find another job, good luck with that, as saving up money was so difficult due to so little pay. Getting a second job was off the table too, as the hours were so long. Plus, Rooster Teeth wouldn't let people do it anyways. The apparent nepotism at the company didn't help either, as friendships were favored more over who can actually do the job, which honestly explains a lot about who was and was not fired at Rooster Teeth. Remember this tweet right here for later. This does not hold up well. While the firing of Shane Newville and Gina Ohm definitely got some heads turning over on the RWBY side of things, what I believe really turned this snowball into an avalanche, in terms of airing out all of Rooster Teeth's dirty laundry, was the infamous firing of Vic Mignona. On the Rooster Teeth side of things, he had been voicing the character Crow Bronwyn since his introduction. He was accused of a various number of things, ranging from hair pulling to sexual assault, generally painting him to be a creepy and foul person who might have actually committed a crime or two. It all sounds pretty bad. So in 2019, Rooster Teeth almost immediately fired Vic. I don't even think they conducted an internal investigation. That's how quick it was. Just like with Funimation and Crunchyroll, almost every news outlet I could find unanimously agreed that Vic Mignona was a terrible person as well. So the rest of the internet put on their detective hats to see if any of these were actually legit. And what so many content creators and unrelated journalists found was that 99% of these allegations were A, taken out of context to make Vic look worse, B, had nothing substantial behind him, it's just someone saying something and no other proof, or C, verifiably false. I'll leave links down in the description below if anyone would like more details, but all that's been admitted to and proven was that Vic had eaten a jelly bean as part of a joke, and had a consensual kiss with a woman almost 2 decades ago now. So I guess it's up to opinion as to whether or not he deserved to have his career torched because of that. As for me, I still think that he was unjustly fired, and sabotaged by people who wanted to Me Too him for clout. After this termination happened, it was like a dam had burst over at Rooster Teeth, with employees leaving under dubious circumstances, along with shining a spotlight under all of Rooster Teeth's hooplas. And do you want to know who wasn't fired during all of this? Oh yeah, Gray Haddock. He left the company shortly after Vic was fired, closing the chapter on his Rooster Teeth career with grace. Well, as graceful as he can get with everyone else knowing what he had done. While there might have been internal pressure to leave, it's still crazy to me that someone who sped up Rooster Teeth's destruction wasn't fired. Oh wait, there's more. From allegations of workplace harassment and bigotry, to staff sending unsolicited, dirty pictures of themselves to minors, to their vice president being arrested on domestic abuse charges. It's just been controversy after controversy for Rooster Teeth during its last few years of life. By the way, the company only made a statement on the bigotry, and went almost completely radio silent on the infinitely more criminal offenses of their staff, as if their diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives were more important than anything else.
No, it'd be against my moral compass.
Your fucking moral compass is a roulette wheel!
So with everything that's happened over the years with Rooster Teeth, I can't help with feeling relief, a little bit of hope. Relief in that karma has finally come for this company, and hopeful because maybe now some of these shows can maybe now go to new homes where they'd be treated better. Maybe the Gnome Out of Nowhere creator can get the rights back. Maybe RWBY can be rebooted into an awesome anime. Maybe the employees can work on bigger and better things. The possibilities are endless. And with that, I just got one last thing to say. Rest in pieces, Rooster Teeth. Riot Kitty is signing out.